who is in Samaria, for he would heal him of his leprosy. May God bless the reading of his word today. Viktor Frankl was a young Jewish psychiatrist who was taken to one of the Nazi death camps during the Holocaust. His parents, his wife, several family members, and many of his friends were killed during that time of terror. One day, Viktor Frankl found himself standing before the Gestapo completely naked. They had taken all of his clothes. They had taken all of his hair. They had taken his wedding ring. They had even taken the gold out of his teeth. He stood there with seemingly absolutely nothing. But as he wrote in his book later on, he knew that he had one thing that they could not take away from him. And that was, and here's what he wrote, my belief that there is a purpose to my problem. That somehow, some way, sometime, some good will come out of my hell on earth. Viktor Frankl was right, for he survived that death camp and went on to become a world-famous psychiatrist who helped many, many people get through their problem to their purpose. In our text for today, we have a classic example of God bringing his purpose out of our problem. So let's begin by looking at the problem in our story. Naaman's problem was, of course, his disease of leprosy. This commander of the Syrian army had come down with the most dreaded, the most debilitating, and the most deadly disease of his day and time. The disease of leprosy was always slow, torturous, and fatal. There was no treatment for it. There was no cure for it. But now look at the problem of his young servant girl, this Israelite that he had taken captive. As a slave to Naaman, she had no freedom, none at all. She could only do what she was told to do as a slave. As a slave, she had no family. Her family members were either all dead or taken captive themselves. She had no friends, for they too were either dead or serving as slaves to the Syrians. And she had no familiar. She lived in a foreign land, a foreign language, foreign customs, foreign dress, foreign food, foreign gods, foreign everything. So Naaman had his seemingly impossible and unsolvable problem of leprosy, and the young girl had her seemingly impossible and unsolvable problem of being a slave to foreign masters. And here we see a fact of life, folks. No matter what rung of society's ladder you're on, if you're on the top like Naaman, or if you're on the bottom like this girl, everybody's got problems. Everybody's got problems. But now, before we can get to the purpose, we've got to look at the pathway. There is a pathway that leads to the purpose. And there are two things involved in this pathway that will take us from our problem to his purpose. First of all, there has to be the absence of hatred. The absence of hatred. This young slave girl, she had every right and reason in the world to hate the guts of Naaman. Naaman had ravaged and ruined her country. Naaman had enslaved or executed her family and friends. Naaman was responsible for her losing everything and everyone that was near and dear to her. And yet, in spite of all of that, she told him of a man back home that could heal him of his leprosy. How amazing is that? How awesome is that? How unusual and unique is that? How many of us would have done that? Instead of her keeping her mouth shut and watching Naaman rot and die, she tells the man how to be cured and healed. Clearly, this little slave girl was a mighty, mighty big person. So big that she harbored no hate for the man who had made her life a living hell on earth. And then, second of all, on this pathway, there must be the presence of humility. After Naaman goes to see this man, who turned out to be the prophet Elisha, and after he overcame his ego and pride, he went and dipped himself 7 times in the dirty, dingy, dinky little Jordan River. This proud and powerful man, this man of might and means, this man of rank and riches, this big shot, big dog somebody, lowers and humbles himself probably for the first time in his entire life. Now, with the absence of hatred and the presence of humility, now we can get to his purpose. His purpose. The purpose of God involved and included 2 things. First of all, Naaman was cleansed physically. Verse 14 tells us that after he went skinny dipping, his flesh was restored like the flesh of a little child, and he was clean. His leprosy is cured. His death sentence is lifted. He is as clean as the bottom of a newborn baby. But there was a second purpose and result. Not only was he cleansed physically, he was converted spiritually. Verse 15, Naaman tells Elisha, "Now I know there is no God in all the earth except the God in Israel." Verse 17, Naaman tells Elisha that he will no longer offer offerings and sacrifices to other gods, but only to the one true God. And in response to that, Elisha told Naaman in verse 19, "Go in peace." Go in peace physically, go in peace spiritually. So out of this awful problem came this awesome purpose: the physical cleansing of the man and the spiritual converting of the man. But without the pathway connecting the two, without the absence of hatred and the presence of humility, there would have been no purpose realized. There would have been no cleansing. There would have been no converting. So here's the message for us, ladies and gentlemen. As we struggle and strive with our problems, and we all do, for us to reach and realize the purpose that God has waiting for us, we cannot hate, and we must be humble. For us to make it from our problem to his purpose, there will be some Naamans in our life that we have to forgive. And there will be some Jordan rivers that we have to dip in. God will not bring about his purpose in our life when we're full of hate and empty of humility. Now, I know it's hard. Believe you me, I know. It's hard to forgive our Naamans. And I know that it's hard to go down into our Jordan rivers. But to get from our problem to his purpose, hate is not allowed and humility is required. So God help you and God help me to hear and heed this truth and this message as we all deal with our problems. If you want to get from your problem to his purpose, get rid of the hate and get yourself some humility. For that's the pathway that connects the two. Would you bow with me, please?